Thank you very much for that. You gave us certain inputs, and the what you also brought out was that there are certain frameworks which are there. You used the word standards. So towards that, my next question is that in what ways can governments, regulatory bodies, and industry associations collaborate to establish consistent standard frameworks for measuring and reporting ESG performance across different sectors and regions? First, General Anil, please.
Um, Actually, when we, like I said, when we look at the ESG framework of companies, uh, inherent in that is a huge amount of regulatory mechanism that is built in. Now, uh, we've opened this company called Strat MRO, and the kind of, though it is just a consulting company, but the kind of due diligence we have to do with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in doing our documentation and others goes to show that the systems are in place to make sure that nobody defrauds by intent, um, and does an ethical business practice. But that said, I think inherent also in the society is the fact that you could bend some rules, you could give dubious information and incorrect information, or which we call the misinformation. You get into a misinformation campaign and hide and play, and play and hide. I think these are the two words which are against the norms of ethical behavior. When you play and hide, you play something wrong and hide, or you hide something and play. So I think, and that is when you actually create the unethical. And when you create the unethical, you can go on up to a point in time, after which there will be whistleblowers. And today, given the visibility and transparency that exists in the social media framework, I think there are whistleblowers. Now, what can the government do beyond what it has already done? Now, I think there is also a need for the government to continuously evaluate, maybe annually, evaluate as to what are the nuanced requirements of ESG, how can, or what are the, should I say, gaps that have been observed over this year in the environmental practices, as an example, of companies. What are the societal gaps that have been, whether it is CSR, whether it is giving the right kind of product to the customer, whether it is uh, meeting their requirements truthfully, whether it is engaging with its investors correctly. I think the moment you hear of anything which actually upsets the apple cart of ESG, the government should bring in reforms and apply them retrospectively. That should be the need. And therefore, today, when we look at ministries, I think they have their audits in place, they have audit organizations in place. I think there's a need to build a vertical in the ministry, and I would say in all the ministries, which looks at ESG and technology. I'll put it TESG: technology, environment, societal, and governance, and carries out an audit, seeks reports, goes through details, and makes sure that these aspects are actually very well adhered to. I mean, we say, oh, India is a very big country with a large population, but I think we have a huge amount of structure at the district level and at the block level. I think you need to enforce at those levels. You have to create structures at those levels. And I think today the ecosystem can easily be created given the demographic dividend of youth bulge that we have. So, to my mind, if the government has to step in, it has to create firstly structures uh, with experienced people, maybe veterans. All of us who are talking on this are veterans. We could actually be integrated with the youths, and who are well qualified and well skilled to take on audits, ESG audits. And I think we should be independent watchdogs. We have a company which we've opened, YVR, and two more directors. Stratamaro, I think such consulting groups should be given the role, or should be able to don the role of doing ESG compliances in companies. And that could be government driven. And I think, therefore, as government, they should look at the long-term view. They should see not the immediate advantages that are accruing of any policy or anything. And therefore, there's a need for the government to bring in structures. There's a need for bringing in policies which think long-term and act long-term. And more importantly, look at the governance structures. Are they qualified? As an example, today, you'll find a lot of senior leadership in companies who don't understand technology, who do not want to, who are very, who are status quoist because they don't understand technology. They feel, oh, we're getting good return on investment. I don't think we need to invest anymore. If the waste is being managed this way, it will be managed this way only. And they take it upon themselves that there is no need to become a little more benign in waste management, just as an example. And therefore, I think there's a huge role the government can play and the society can play in bringing structures in this place, in place. And if we bring in these governance issues, I'm sure things will improve manifold. And today, we are fortunate to have a youth bulge. We are also fortunate to have a veteran bulge. There's a huge amount of veterans also. I think at both ends, we have got a very good, should I say, capability available. We have to put this capability together and create the capacity within the government in terms of structures and create a policy so that the ESG gets very well managed, while industry looks at it internally, society looks at it externally, the government looks at it from compliance perspective. I think if this triad works well, what we are discussing today will become a huge role model reality. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil, for that. You covered a big scope there. Same question to you, Brigadier Vijay, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, how do governments, regulatory bodies, industrial associations collaborate so that ESG standards are maintained? So, it comes across various ways. The first is there are standards already laid down in the world. You have the Global Reporting Initiative standard. You have Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. You have a criteria set by the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So government, regulatory bodies and industry associations collaborate so that you harmonize across this and you have a format which links all these together. You foster public-private partnerships to develop and implement ESG reporting standards. You engage with stakeholders. That is the investors, the businesses, NGOs, civil society organizations, to gather feedback on your ESG reporting. By involving a diverse range of stakeholders, government and regulatory boards, you can ensure that the standards reflect the interests and priorities of all the stakeholders. Then you do capability building and education. You provide resources, training, education to businesses. A business gets sometimes extra focused on the financial aspect. So there's a need for this training to be imparted to the top leadership and possibly across the business on ESG. Governments can support capacity building initiatives to enhance understanding of ESG issues. Then you have a lot of international cooperation. So you must encourage international collaboration among the regulatory bodies, industry associations. Sometimes ESG should not be used as a tool to prevent a developing nation from entering with their products into developed nations. So there has to be a lot of international cooperation in ESG. Then governments can have regulatory incentives such as tax breaks, subsidies, preferential treatment in case you have good ESG reporting standards. Positive incentives will help a lot. Then you have the enforcement mechanism. So implement enforcement mechanisms to ensure compliance with ESG reporting. Data sharing and transparency is another area where governments can push. Encourage the exchange of ESG data and best practices. Facilitate benchmarking. Then you have global conventions and agreements. You have the very famous United Nations SDGs. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. You have the Paris Agreement on climate change. So if you align your ESG reporting standards with all these international frameworks, then as a nation, as a company, you become much, much more competitive when it comes to your exports, imports, and the way you do business. So by collaborating effectively, governments, regulatory bodies, and industry associations can establish consistent standards and frameworks, which will drive much more, as the question itself said, how do you drive greater transparency, accountability, and sustainability? I'll give a simple example of how in my previous company, which was Suzlon, and we were a green company, how did we improve our whole ESG score? What did we do? Practically, how we went about it. So let us look at what we did on the E aspect. The first thing we focused was on energy efficiency. So we implemented energy saving measures like LED lighting on our HVAC systems so that we reduce energy consumption. We invested in renewable energy sources to run our own companies so that you reduce reliance on fossil fuels and decrease GHG. We focused on our waste management, implemented various waste reduction and recycling programs to minimize waste generation and promote a circular economy. We implemented water saving measures such as low flow fixtures, irrigation systems to minimize water wastage. In our supply chain, we looked at sourcing materials from suppliers who had strong environmental credentials. So that is how we implemented and gained a better score on the E factor. On the S factor, what did we do? We promoted diversity. We looked at the ratio of male to female workforce. We looked at encouraging physically challenged people who could contribute to work. So we implemented policies and initiatives that foster this diverse and inclusive workforce. We prioritized employee health and safety a lot by having extensive scorecards on HSE, providing a safe working environment, conducting safety training, implementing safety protocols. We ensured adherence to labor practices so that you adhere to labor laws, provide fair wages and benefits, promote employee rights and protections. Since we were spread out across rural India with our wind farms, we engaged through CSR with local communities, did philanthropic initiatives, volunteer programs, etc. We had a lot of meaningful engagement with stakeholders, employees, customers, suppliers, investors, communities. On the G factor, governance factor, ethical leadership had to be demonstrated. Highest standards of integrity, transparency, and accountability in every business dealing was viewed. Any business dealing had to be viewed by a parameter. Similarly, on the board of directors, diversity was pushed through so that we had people from various backgrounds, experience, and different perspectives. Then we aligned executive compensation with long-term sustainability goals. So the top executives were analyzed from the way they are adhering to the ESG principles. We did a lot of risk management, a robust risk management process to identify, assess all the risks to our ESG issues. There was a body which was continuously looking at our compliance with laws, regulations, industry standards so that a culture of ethics and integrity throughout the organization was done. So that's how it's a very practical and simple, but that's how a company can implement higher ESG scores. Thank you, sir.
I think YVR, what you brought out is very, very pertinent. And sir, I would, to the viewers, I'd like to say that in the army also, actually, willy-nilly, though we don't use this term of ESG, we are very, very conscious of our ESG footprint. And we always stand out as role models when we represent our country in any of the United Nations missions or any diplomatic missions abroad or any training missions abroad. I mean, we are always we always stand out for our ESG, if I may say, fiber and behavior uh, in every aspect of our lives. And I think with this, I'd like to tell the viewers that we have a company called Strat MRO, and we would be more than happy to carry out not only an audit, which may be a passive area of or a passive way of working. We'd also like to offer some active actions that you could take to enhance your ESG visage and make the paradigm shift to become a role model. So I think for those viewers who are looking at ESG beyond what they do, Strat Amaro can be their partner. With that, I'll thank you for this. It was nice being part of this forum, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Anil. In fact, I endorse that. The Strata MRO is having excellent composition. They are really capable people who have come together. And I endorse what General Kapoor just mentioned. With that, we come to an end to this particular panel discussion. Thank you very much to our viewers and subscribers. We look forward to bringing many more such panel discussions to you. Thank you for listening. Jai Hind.